Welcome to my Commodore 64 Games Memories. This is where I look at old games and some of the technical details behind them. Let's get into it. Today we have Turrican II, published in 1991 by Rainbow Arts on the Commodore 64. I'm going to be looking at the tape version first. The tape version is the first version that I got, and I very quickly then bought the disc version way back in the day. So looking at this, actually I don't think there's any auto boot at all. In the tape code, the tape header looks nice and blank, and there's no auto run start there. There's no vectors being claimed or anything like that. So let's just have a look at what the tape version looks like when it's loading. You can see it's loaded quite a lot of chunk of data there in the basic RAM area, and it's relocated some of the data back down into the tape buffer. I don't know why it didn't include that data in the tape header buffer itself to begin with, but hey ho, never mind. You know, this was released in 1991. Auto run methodology was extremely well known on the disc and the tape. So this is the version that I had on tape originally, and I remember this black screen with very thin border color updates going on there. The tape version actually loads quite quickly. I was really pleased actually when I got to the title screen and we saw there it was using some kind of like LZ perhaps based decompression routine there, because it was decompressing backwards through memory, but it was also reading and writing blocks from different parts of memory, so there was definitely some kind of like dictionary copying going on there. So we can see that there's what looks like a character set being loaded and more backwards decompression going on, some memory shuffling going on there, and then the Turrican II title screen starts with the two sprites there indicating that it's Turrican II. I love this title music. Thank you very much, Marcus Seabold. I hope I've got your name correct. The introduction code is also pretty cool in this. Now the loading of the level on the tape version is, relatively quick, depending on what it's doing, but this tape version is characterized by not really having any loading screen, which I was a little bit disappointed in, to be honest. But then again, it was nice being able to load and relatively quickly get into the game. And of course, being familiar with the first Turrican, instantly this kind of like gameplay is very familiar. The spraying around weapon, the rotating weapon, is different. It's individual bullets rather than a stream of electricity like it was in the other version. There seemed to be a little bit more going on the screen on this version. It seemed to be in these initial early levels, especially, it seemed to be a little bit more technically competent compared to the first Turrican, for example. Standard kind of like shoot the invisible blocks and sometimes get pickups type thing. Different weapons compared to the first Turrican. Relatively cool looking weapons though. I mean, the laser is really quite good. But that's basically the tape version. Now I'm really more interested in the PAL disc version because I had the PAL disc version as well. I quickly moved on to the disc version, and actually I was really pleased back in the day. Here I'm just using the G64 conv tool to convert the two G64 disk images into a textual representation so I can have a quick little look. According to the website there, and I'll put a link in the debugging text file. It checks some weak bits on, what was it, track 18, sector 6. I'm just going to have a quick little look in the extracted G64 disk image data just to see if it's telling us anything interesting about track 18, sector 6. And there isn't really anything too special about this. The protection was really quite weak compared to some of the other protection schemes that were being used. So we can see that there are a lot of 0 bits, but that's about it, really. So we won't look too much into the tape and disk protection with this video, I don't think. I am anticipating that there's going to be quite a lot of content to go through. Now, using the C64Debugger on the disk loader, so we can see here that the pretty pictures that come along, the high resolution bitmap pretty pictures, actually are way up in the high bank. We can see before it starts loading that we've got this lovely lower border, side border scroller. Now, obviously, this is going to be using sprites. When we actually press the fire button to start loading, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sprites for the loading message actually coming up through the lower border, and we can see here that we've got this lovely backwards decompression while loading routine going on. I'm just setting up the C64 and obviously the drive disassembly and register views just for a quick little look. We can see that the drive code is doing a wait on its serial port there with a bit 1800 in hex, which is the drive's VIA, which is the same as the CIA on the Commodore 64. Very similar functionality. It drives the serial bus, well, that register does anyway. This deck D001, D003, 05, 7, 9, B and D on the Commodore 64 at CC5D moves the sprites up the screen because it's updating the sprite's Y coordinate, and it only does that for a few frames because the sprites don't continuously move up the screen. On the drive side, on the code here, we can see that it is using the serial port registers 1800 in hex specifically. You can see it's shifting the value in 14 in the drive side code there, the blue highlighted line. It does that shift of memory location 14 in 0 page a few times. It's shifting out the bit and then it's deciding how it's going to send that bit. And it's actually doing this with an unrolled piece of code here, rather than doing a loop with, say for example, using the Y red as an index. On the drive code, those red lines that I've highlighted there as breakpoints, that's the end of the send data routine. On the Commodore 64 side of the code, of course, it's reading the serial port, shifting values around, and then rotating them in as you would normally kind of expect. We can see it's doing 4 chunks of the same subroutine here on the Commodore 64 at 6966 JSR 6966 in hex. Does that 4 times. It's then doing a JSR to 6B86. So since the Commodore 64 is running that same subroutine 4 times, it looks like it's pulling in 2 bits at a time and then storing the result on the Commodore 64 at memory location $F0, which is down in 0 page. I'm just updating my notes for the tape version, and then I'm also going to start taking notes for the disk version. This file will be linked down below in the video description. We can see that the screen for the bitmap is what looks like a full screen. As I'm writing this, I'm thinking actually that there was an initial loader before this loading or this game introduction animation occurs. The memory pattern actually looked familiar to me as well. I'm just having a quick look through the disk memory there, and I don't really see anything unusual. I'm a little bit intrigued about the synchronization seems to be done via the serial port, but the timing synchronization, there doesn't seem to be any raster line based timing synchronization there. So the protocol that's being used is going to be forgiving in terms of timing wobble between the drive and the Commodore 64. This means that it's a slightly slower loader, but it's much more reliable, and it allows the screen to be easily switched on. You can see here the first initial load is actually blisteringly quite quick. It went zooming through memory quite significantly there. Let's have a look at that again. Yeah, interrupting it in the middle of the way through. We can see actually this is using that very different first loader, where the code is actually doing a very optimal, what looks like a 2-bit transfer protocol. The screen is off, so there's no bad line, but we can see on the Commodore 64 at CD29 there, we can see it's starting to do a load accumulator with DD00 in hex, doing an LSR, LSR, A, and then an EOR, LSR, LSR, A, EOR. I'm just doing a little extract to see if I can do any recovery of files, so using my updated C1541 utility, I look for chains of blocks on the disk which are not already listed in the directory structure. So looking at the first two large files that I can see that they don't really seem to have any kind of like sensible load address attached to them. It's possible that they contain data, but I don't think so. Proper file data. Having a look at all of the other files now, obviously this one at track 18 sector 0 is obviously the block allocation map in the directory. We can see most of these, the 2 bytes at the beginning don't look like sensible load addresses. This one, however, looks like the last one, which is at track 18, sector 18, funnily enough, looks like it's high score data, doesn't it? That was the only interesting data that I think I could see there. Using that hex editor is really quite quick, just to load in a whole bunch of files and then just inspect them very quickly. We can see actually that the directory structure has quite a lot of files already linked into the directory there, so it's a fairly standard, it looks like a fairly standard DOS format. This first loader actually that Turrican and Turrican II seem to use is quite interesting. In terms of the speed that it gets with the protocol and the bit shuffling that it does, both on the drive side code and also on the Commodore 64 side code. I must say I do quite like it. You can see it's really quite quick. It seems to use that spare page in 0 page there on the Commodore 64 as temporary workspace as well. Now when I got the disk version, I was really happy with these extra introduction bitmap screens telling the story of the game. And we can see here that if we use the Sprites graphics map mode, then we can see that the sprites are actually being updated there in the first bank, whereas the bitmap is actually displayed from the last big bank. And of course the sprites need to be horizontally expanded to fill the width of the screen, including the border area. We can see it's done some decompression of these quite lovely graphics, these lovely high resolution graphics. They are really fantastic. They really do set the story, the tone of the game. I feel I was, like I say, I was really pleased to see them. Comic book style, kind of. So I remember reading through this scroll text for the whole story of the game. No real great pros, to be honest, but you know, back in the day it was really quite nice to see polish and time and effort being put into the presentation for the game, of course. So it seems that there's quite a lot of reading going on from the compressed data and then decompressing the bitmap data, and then quite a lot of memory shuffling around as well. So the little border area around the main picture doesn't form part of the compressed data, for example, I don't think. We can see that the expanded bitmap data up at the top of that bitbank there is all dislocated and out of sync, and then it's finally copied down to the real bitmap, which is being displayed in the second half, the end part of the last bitbank. Now, we've seen this backwards decompression before, going from this introduction sequence into the game title screen. Note that this one doesn't seem to use a full page of 0 page as temporary workspace. It's just using a few here and there 0 page registers. Now the title screen is actually quite technically interesting. Of course, the Turrican logo, minus the 2 in yellow, is actually obviously bitmap. Now, the scrolling messages that we can see here, introduction, the names, eventually what is the score table, these are not what they seem. This is just in-game text that I've just seen in the memory here. But anyway, yes, the scroll is actually a little bit different. So, looking at this, there seems to be data in the screen there which has repeating ordered characters. In other words, that screen, the scrolling part of the screen, is actually using 2 character sets, and it seems to be scrolling the character set data. Now, this had me puzzled originally, because when I was looking at this I was thinking, the bottom part is just a text screen, but no, the text screen doesn't have the usual kind of like 6 to 8 pixels stabilization black area that you would normally expect to see if it was doing a vertical scroll. So this had me puzzled for a while on how it was done. And then it's got that kind of like mirrored effect in the bottom as well. So that mirrored effect, okay, so first of all, the mirrored effect is using the horizontal hardware pixel scroll, left and right pixel scroll. That's, relatively well understood, but the vertical movement down had me a little bit puzzled as well, because you couldn't really do that by updating the Y hardware scroll registers. So, got me thinking, how was it being done? Now, back in the day I did find this out, but we can see it very easily, very, very quickly, that actually nothing is being scrolled from a text screen point of view. All of the scrolling goes into those 2 character sets that we can see being updated, and as more text scrolls on, we can see that more of the text fills up the character set data in the graphics map view there. So we can see that there are 2 character sets for this text. And if we use the debug to show the character set at D00, we can see that it's the top part, the top 4 character lines, for example. And then if we have it side by side with the character set at D800, then we can see that the character set at D800 is actually rendering the last 4 lines plus the reflected part of the screen here. So there is a little split halfway down from this scrolling update section of the screen where it switches between the character set at D000 to the character set at D800, and then the code just has to update the 2 character sets. Now it can afford to do a sparse update, so it's not as expensive as scrolling the 2 full character sets. So that's how that works, which is quite an intriguing way of doing it. It's a really interesting way of doing it, and it's a very good way of doing it because you can fill the screen real estate, the vertical portions of the screen, completely without having to worry about the normal kind of like black stabilization area for stabilizing the hardware vertical scroll. It also allows you to do that fade effect, the fade out, the wipe effect between the text as it scrolls off. So the same disk code here that we just saw that was used for the introduction load with the screen on is used by the game for the game data load. That's cool. Always good to see reuse of code. This loading level message is obviously just a standard text screen with obviously a customized character set. No real great surprise there. What is a surprise is that the screen is at CC00 and the character set for this screen is at C800. A really intriguing way of doing it. It means that the game can load the levels character set at C000, and then later on the game screens can be updated to show the 2 double buffered screens for the scrolling area of the game. Now I'm thinking of Turrican I, aren't I, where there is a little hidden block on the upper left hand corner of the start area. So there we go. The character set is now switched to being using the character set at C000. Putting a breakpoint for the store at D800 allows us to see exactly where the color scroll code is. Very quick, very easy to find that. Following on, similar idea to the Turrican, the original Turrican video, I'm going to add an increment D020 so we can see the timing for the color scroll. As we validated last time for Turrican 1, we can see that the color scroll starts immediately where the screen split is for the vertical scroll. This is no great surprise. It was a methodology used to great success by Turrican 1, so the programmer, same programmer, and Manfred Trenz, right, used it in Turrican 2. We can see there, no surprise at all. It finishes scrolling the screen data at line 40. It's then updating VIC registers, screen color, all of the usual kind of thing that you would normally expect to see. Multicolor color registers, and then very quickly starts updating the player sprite data. Now what's interesting to note here, where I was flashing it in red there at AAA, the ASLA on the Commodore 64 code seems to be multiplying the X coordinate and then storing it into the X register for the sprite. And again, there is this multiply by 2, the ASLA register instruction there, which multiplies the player's X position and then stores it in the 3 sprites there, D000, D002, and D004. And it updates the Sprite MSB X register, the one that helps the sprites move to the far right hand side of the screen compared to the left hand side of the screen, it updates those appropriately as well. And this is interesting. So in Turrican II, the sprite X positions all seem to be multiplied by 2. This means that the game sprite positions are at half horizontal resolution. It means that the game doesn't have to do any sprite calculation updates and taking into account carry, which makes the game logic update routine simpler, but it means that your sprite horizontal X positions are half resolution, which means that they would move in 2 screen pixel steps, high resolution screen pixel steps, which, if you don't want your sprites to be dislocated from the scrolling character backgrounds, it means that your character backgrounds are limited to a speed of 2 high resolution pixels, or in steps of 2 high resolution pixels. It means that you effectively lose half your horizontal pixel resolution for scrolling. But it does make everything quicker and a lot better. So that's an interesting thing to note. That goes on all the way through this multiplexor. It's a very common pattern here now. Yeah, we can definitely see the color timing for Turrican II is very similar to the color scroll timing for Turrican 1. Of course, if you wanted to scroll the character screen at 1 horizontal high resolution pixel horizontal scroll steps, it means that the sprites would be out of sync by 1 high resolution pixel. You might not think that that's a lot, but if the sprites kind of like wobble with respect to the underlying screen scroll, it would actually become very noticeable. In quite a lot of older games, especially with games with vertical scrolling or horizontal scrolling, actually, you think games like Whizball, the original version of Commodore, for example, all of them were using a multiplexor that seemed to lag a frame behind from the screen scroll, which, to me was very noticeable back in the day, and even more when I played some of the older games. It's extremely noticeable that the sprites kind of like wobble or lag a frame behind what movement the character screen does. It's quite incredible that that they would program such a thing. But hey ho, it's faster to do the game logic and to decouple the game logic like that. But it's worth, in my view, putting in the extra effort to make sure that your sprite multiplexor positions are in sync with the character screen scroll update, so that you don't get this dislocated, lagging wobble going on. It makes the game feel better, in my view, that sprite and scroll updates are properly synchronized. So what's interesting to note here is that this effect, when the level comes in, or goes away, I think, as well, when the level exits, is actually a whole bunch of expanded sprites, expanded high resolution sprites, X and Y expanded sprites that are tiled to fill the entire screen. Isn't that fantastic? So because it's a tiled update, you only need to update these select few sprite definitions. And the funny thing is that these sprite positions are using the temporary screen area here. So you can see that the off screen, the screen that's not being rendered currently, stores temporarily the sprite position. So the game is reusing this memory quite cleverly here, I think, to actually do that wipe effect. It's only when the game scrolls do you then start using the other screen buffer. So of course, why not use it as temporary sprite? Update. Just adding a note to that in the debugging details pile. It's such a lovely effect. I'm glad that was done like that. Now going into quickly the Commodore 64 Debug GUI with the disk version of the game. So we can definitely see here the use of expanded sprites for the scrolling message in the border area. Right in the border area, actually, look, and the sprites are actually over the top of that. We can see the use of sprites for this loading message. Scrolling up here, there's actually a spare sprite on the left hand side there, which is intriguing. That spare sprite might be there for synchronization for the border clear. The border opening routine, the border register update clear. So we can see that the extra twinkles and the 2 which comes in are actually sprites. Again, this shouldn't really be a surprise to anyone really how it's done. So we can see at this point of the screen it's using the text screen rather than the bitmap. It's just updating the 2 character sets. There's a little split there. Again, not that surprising. And we saw that in ICU64 anyway. Just checking here. Yes, we can see that there is a sprite grid for the fade in effect. Very clearly saw that in the debugger there with all of the red boxes. We can see all of the sprites being used in the multiplexor during the game. And again, the same kind of like sprite grid for the fade out. So going back to the level now, back in ICU debugger. So first thing I want to do is that I want to use the memory scan functionality of ICU64 to try and find where the lives are in memory. So I've taken a new memory snapshot, and what I need to do now is I need to die, and then I look for a changed value like that. Now there are still far too many changed values in memory, so I narrow down the list of candidates by killing myself. Again, clicking the changed button shows that there's still quite a large number of candidates. So again, still a large number of candidates. We can do this process a few more times. The lives counter changed again from 0 lives to 3 lives, so click the changed button again. Run over here, die quickly, click the change button. There seems to be quite a lot of changed memory locations going on here. Looks like it might take a while. And again, is it that one? Maybe 78. Something tells me, however, it's not. Look, the value is changing too much still. The column on the right is actually, I think, the live display. The candidate list is still quite long. I'm going to do a punt here and say equal to 1. Now, a lot of times games will try and hide by obfuscation exactly where their lives count is. But here, from that list of candidates, there was only 1 that was equal to, well, only 2 that's equal to 0. If I start the game now, look, the live display is showing me it's this one, and narrowing it down, FF, F, C. looks like a good candidate. And when I die, it's changed again now. The live display was showing 1 when it had 1 life left. Okay, cool. So let's try setting this to a good value that we can see. I don't think 7F is a good value. I think it might be a binary coded decimal, which is quite common in games, actually. So let's jump off the waterfall, and there we go, 77276. So using this infinite lives poke, if you like, will let me play through the rest of the game now. I want to go through the rest of the game now, and I want to do a little bit of analysis on each of the large bosses, and also some of the other technical aspects of some of the other levels. Now, I'm not going to show the whole video playing through the whole game. I'm just going to keep on cutting to the various different places where I want to have a little chat about. So bear with me. So while the scrolling area for the game has the graphics and the sprites and the character set and the screens, in the last Vic Bank, the bottom part of the screen, which is the score panel, has a character set and a screen just for that in the first Vic Bank rather than the last Vic Bank. So when moving around, we can see that the last Vic Bank, the upper Vic Bank, has 2 double buffered screens, and those double buffered screens are just after the character set data. So the character set data is in the first 2 screens, if you like, the top left and the top right screen. So C000 to C7FF, that's all of the character set data, and then the 2 other screens starting at C800 and then CC00. The bottom left and the bottom right screens are the 2 double buffered screens. There seems to be a little bit of extra data there, which is in the area where the score panel is, which is either data which is spare, or it could be, for example, sprite data, or just extra animation data, or something like that. To be honest, I'm looking at the memory view as the screen is scrolling, and it doesn't seem to be updating those bytes for that screen, for the extra spare memory at the bottom of the screen, so I don't think it's used terribly much. The thing about Turrican and Turrican II is that there are quite a lot of secrets, and the maps are really quite large, which is a technical achievement in itself, to be honest, because the game has all of this multi-directional, multi-speed scrolling as well, so there's quite a lot of things to fit in, and both Turrican 1 and 2 have quite a lot of extra lives dotted around the place. I liked this part of the level where the leaves and other kind of like enemy sprites start blowing across to push you over here. Now, that's because eventually you need to get pushed and you need to go down the waterfall, but if you are lucky, you discover that you can actually jump all the way around. But here we have the little arrow eventually coming along and pointing that you need to go down, and funnily enough, you can destroy it with your weapon. And if you keep on going down here, then you get to this multi-segmented sprite-based enemy, which was quite a nice little surprise to find. I quite like that kind of thing. It reminds me of the larger worm-like enemies in things like Salamander, which is a horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up, basically. So after going through the underground cavern area and avoiding that blowing leaves left thingy, the strong wind thing, we get to this first enemy. Now, Turrican 1 and Turrican 2, but Turrican 2 has even larger multi-sprite enemies. And the screen generally stops scrolling, and I noticed that some of the weapons firing effects update both screen banks, and some only update one screen bank. Now, this weapon here, the spinny around multi-bullet weapon thing, only occurs in one screen bank, and generally speaking, when that happens in the game as well, the game stops scrolling immediately, and that's probably because it takes quite a lot of time, CPU time, to update. Whereas with other weapon effects, if I fire the laser or the spread shot or whatever it is, or the balls, it was appearing in both screen banks. This enemy is quite interesting. So I noticed that actually in the sprite data in the graphics map, if you have a look where the bottom 4 sprite rows in the graphics map, and I'm pausing the screen here so you can actually see it a lot easier, some top parts of the sprites are actually updated by the CPU to copy the last line of the previous sprite. Now, with some of these multi-sprite stacked enemies, it does that to try and reduce the sprite update artifacts for when the sprite registers are updating on or near bad lines, and it's doing that so that you don't get kind of like tearing the sprite effects. That's what I think it's doing anyway. But it only occurs when the enemy is at certain positions or vertical positions on the screen, compared to probably the offsets of the bad lines. But then again, the game also introduces this vertical screen shake effect as well, which is part of the hardware scroll. It's not actually updating any characters. You can see from the double buffered screens that the characters stay the same. So when you're updating the vertical pixel hardware scroll anyway, that changes the position where the bad lines occur. So this complicates matters. So I think that's why the game is doing a software update of the sprite data to try and compensate for that. Here we go. Now the enemy is jumping around and not really hitting me. You see, I think this first kind of like boss is relatively simple. I quite like the way it explodes into that nicely kind of like shattered explosion effect, multi-sprite explosion effect. I think the game switches back from its special case multi-sprite rendering routine back to its multiplexor at that particular point in time. We can see here where there is a transition between the black screen background color and then the purple screen background color, that the multi-bullet weapon, when it was firing, was showing the purple background behind it. More secrets. I think if you jump up on that one and then oh yes, it's the top of the level. Okay, so anyway, the exit for the level is further down, and then around and then back up again. And then we're coming to the end of the first level, and then we get this little disk loading, the fade out using the sprite sheet, and then the loading level 1-2. And we can see here again that the level loading uses that reverse decompression, kind of like fast load, but with the raster bar effects and everything else turned on. We can see that sprite data is already decompressed in memory, as you would normally expect. Good thing about this game is that it also updates the character for the double buffered screens in terms of character-based animation. So those green things which grow upwards are characters that you can see in the double buffered screens there. And also the stone blocks that fall away are also part of the game. Now you can see where the sprite update occurs for the player sprite. Occasionally the player sprite update will cause the player's head to flicker, and that's because the sprite updates are occurring at that position on the screen. This is, I think, an artifact of the way that the color scroll and the sprite updates are timed in the game. The rest of the multiplex sprites don't seem to have that issue as far as I recall. So that was quite odd. Or maybe it does and you just don't notice it, to be honest, because most of the game play updates for the sprites are for sprites which are visible actually further down into towards the middle or the bottom of the gameplay area rather than the top of the screen. Perhaps the game just cleverly avoids having sprites up at the top of the screen most of the time. Not all the time, but sometimes. So here we have a nice feature of the game where we have destructible backgrounds. These balls are destructible. Now notice here, right, when that weapon is active, the player sprite doesn't fall down. The screen doesn't scroll, again, probably because it takes far too much time to update that. And then once you stop it, then it scrolls. So it's interesting to note, look at the character set data. When this weapon is active, the character set data that you can see here is updating all of the character cells on a dynamic basis depending on which angles for the bullets are needed. And then once you stop using that weapon and you start firing again, it copies across the relevant characters that are used there for the different regular weapons that you're using, which is an interesting way of having dynamic character set updates depending on the weapon that you're using. Just adding that to the notes there. But again, I think it's worth pointing out or mentioning that because it's part of what this game is. A lot of very nice, not too complicated technical tricks, but adding them all together as a sum of its parts, it's more effective and more impressive. Now, this game is funny. It tries to steer you away from this point in the level, and then when I was playing this originally, whoa, you suddenly get this kind of like semi-small little boss. Again, the screen doesn't scroll, and it seems to be another special case boss animation, but when you kill it, you get rewarded with a whole bunch of extra lives. This part of the level is off the beaten track. It tries to steer you away from it, to be honest, and you have to remember to try and actually jump up to that part of the level. And that's the great thing about this game and the previous one, was that there were lots and lots of these semi-hidden, off-the-beaten track sections of the levels that contain lots of little extra bonuses. And here we are, coming down to probably, I think, the ending level boss. Now you can see here that this sprite stack has beneath it an extra character color introduced by updating the characters in the background, which gives the boss an extra color to play with. I think it fills it in with probably black or something like that, but since the background screen color is purple, we get this extra color, and it just makes this boss look a little bit extra special. We can see that the laser effect from the boss can actually be stood on by the main character, which I think is an artifact of using that particular character, but it occurs as part of the character screen, as you would normally expect from looking at it, right? It looks like it's obviously character based. Anyway, so then the stacked multi-sprite boss then explodes, as per usual, into individual sprites which are probably updated with the multiplexor. Level 2-1, the graphical style changes again, and I love the updating characters for the water or the rain effect. I think it's like a waterfall effect, right? It's like a water level. You can see that those characters are actually being updated in the top row of the character set data there in the graphics map debug view. There are actually two. There's the animated characters there for the different parts of the level, and then there's the rain water drip characters also being dynamically updated there. I think once you go down through here, there we go, we've got kind of like this pulsing regular pattern here, which just adds a whole bunch of, it makes it look watery without needing to do any other kind of like special effects. And of course, notice that this animating character effect is high resolution. Here we go, here's another hidden area. Bling, 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 bling. Lots of updates. Lots of bonuses, lots of weapon updates. I love the rich variety of sprite animations in this game. I also love the high resolution sprite bubbles occasionally coming out from the player as well. Just adds that little extra touch of polish to the game, which is consistently high throughout this game anyway, but it just raises the bar ever so slightly. When coming out of the water here, notice how the sprite multicolour changes from blue back to its usual kind of like red colour. Again, another little design technical touch there. When playing this game, you start to realise that these sections, when they scroll in, you kind of like almost predict that you're going to get a multi-sprite boss coming along, and this one is no exception. You can see that you can actually stand on top of it. The boss's weapon in this one is actually updating the character screen, and it's a single character screen. The other character screen is on the left hand side, on the bottom left there. You can see it's partially through its horizontal scroll update. So actually this boss screen here uses a mixture of multiple stacked sprites, or a sprite stack rather, and character screen updates for its weapon. And I think this boss has two parts to it. Once you inflict enough damage, I think the boss's neck disappears and then it starts flying around, right? Here we go, and blink. There we go. Now it starts flying around and firing in both directions, I think, while looking at you, me, out of the screen, it's blinking and everything. Anyway, I'm just using my gun here. There we go. And then, of course, once it finishes and it goes back to the regular multiplexor routine, the screen scrolls. So I'm wondering what on earth to do in this level. Hey? Oh yeah, that's right, you have to fall down. Now, I remember that if you spent the time and effort to actually climb up this destructible background, and you could do that if you were really, really careful, you would find a whole bunch of extra lives. But I don't need those extra lives because I've got the infinite life cheat, so that's fine. Yeah, no, let's not fall down. Notice the background is a parallax scrolling layer, but if you die while the screen is scrolling, you've got this bug where it continues to update when the foreground doesn't scroll, so you can actually definitely see that it's scrolling the character set data. You can actually see it's scrolling the character set data as well, that when the screen scrolls you can see the characters, the high resolution characters are updated at an opposite way, so that at a different speed as well, so that it creates this parallax effect. Now remember the blowing leaves from the previous level? Well, this one has upwards blowing leaves that are not constant, and you have to try and time the jumps to get to the higher part of the level. It took me ages to realise what was happening when I first got this game. There weren't any online cheats or anything like that at the time to tell you, that's what you were meant to do. You just try and figure it out, trial and error. But it's another design touch that I really liked in this game, was this kind of thing. And the enemies, when they're falling down, look, they've got little green high-resolution parachutes, which is also a nice little touch as well. So anyway, these series of jumps, if you're old and slow like me, they can be a little bit difficult to get right sometimes. Anyway, so once you get the jump right, hello, there we go, you get to the boss enemy, I think it's the boss enemy, the one that sticks in my mind, in my memory for a long time, is this one. It's huge, and it's got a huge, great big grabby claw that comes along as well. Now you'll notice that. Oh, well, okay, I'll try not to die. But this one again obviously uses a very optimized and custom sprite draw to update itself. we can see how many sprite frames it's got. But you'll notice that when the grabby claw comes out, the bottom of the grabby claw has this sprite artifact here, and that's just an artifact introduced by trying to update the sprite registers, you know, on or near a bad line, and also have so many sprites above and below as well. It's just difficult to try and update so much, so something has to give, and usually what gives is this kind of sprite artifact here. We have 3 sprites for the player, don't forget, a Y expanded sprite and 2 sprites on top of each other there for the head and the legs, and we have 1, 2, 3 sprites there, and then we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sprites horizontally for the grabby claw, plus all of those, you know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sprites for the first part of the large body. So what I'm going to try and do here is that I'm going to try and fill the memory for the sprites so we can actually, no, I think something's gone wrong slightly there. So, okay, yes, I see what's gone wrong. So I tried to fill the sprite data for this, but also if you notice in the last part of the sprite data here that I tried to fill with FF, there also seems to be some data that is updated by the code. There seem to be some horizontal positions. So when the game goes through its animations, look, you can see that there are 2 sprites there where the sprite data has been updated by the code. I think this kind of like points to me that yeah, this was unexpected. So I think this points to me that there's some animation data hiding around somewhere in what is normally the sprite data. So that has affected how this enemy renders itself, which is a little bit unfortunate, because now I've broken the game at this particular point in time. So I think, well, okay, so even though it's unexpected, let's try and see if we can rescue the situation. You'll notice that, oh look, my player character has not come back now either. That's great. Let's try filling the memory with different values and seeing if that gets my player character back. No, my player character is probably now stuck off screen somewhere. Okay, so this enemy is using characters for its bullets. Yeah, no, that's not working terribly well, is it? I can see actually there's quite a large number of reads going on in the memory map as well, which are before the character data. So I think this is using quite a large table. Maybe it's using a table for the sprite display routine or something like that. Yeah, look at all those green reads going there, and look at how the green reads change depending on the vertical Y position of this multi-sprite enemy. And also I think it's doing sprite, it's probably doing sprite fix-ups for the top or the bottom of the sprite data to avoid these sprite register update artifacts to do with the bad lines like before. Okay, I've got an idea. I'm going to try copying some memory from lower down in memory to the area in memory that I accidentally made wrong, and I'm going to see what effect that has on the game. So I'm going to transfer that many bytes to F000, which is up in the sprite memory. Oh look! Well, that's changed how the multi-sprite rendering routine actually renders some of its sprites. So now, oh look, I think it had a whole bunch of X lookup positions for the sprite sheet, if you like. You know, a great big grid of sprites. I'm going to call it a sprite sheet. But I didn't quite fill all of the sprite data memory there. I only filled up like half. Let's transfer over a bit more. Yeah, look. Funny that. Okay, let's try a different start address. See what we get then. So, oh yeah, look. You can see how this sprite sheet, sprite grid update routine actually works a little bit better. Look, you can see how much of the screen it could fill with the sprites, depending on updating sprite expositions. So anyway, I don't think the game is going to allow me to progress at this particular point in time. So I'm going to start the game again. I'm going to get back to this point of the game and hopefully not destroy what I'm doing, because I want to play through the game. So here we are back again, where I haven't broken the boss and just about killing it now. I love the way it changes colour and then throws up all of its multiplexed sprites off from the bottom of the screen, like it's exploding off the screen. It's quite clever. Nice little touch. Anyway, so I think if you follow the flowing water to the left, you actually get some secrets, but I'm not too interested. This is a nice little level outro, this section here. It uses quite a lot of sprite frames just for that multi-sprite spaceship flying off to the right-hand side. Amazing, really, that it budgeted so much sprite data for the for the ship and the boss. Anyway, let's turn the disc. And now we get into this lovely horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up section. So the thing to note about this is that we have this lovely, very effective, basically it's I think it's a 4-character set based parallax scroller. Actually, the methodology is very similar to that used in Hawkeye, and my previous video on Hawkeye touches on this in more detail. But this one is a slightly sparser background character set, which updates at a different speed to the foreground characters for the scroll. But we can see that it has those four character sets with all of these horizontal sections wrapping around suitably and scrolling suitably to offset. And then we get this lovely, fantastic parallax effect, which when I first saw it blew me away. I tried to replicate it actually somewhat in Tusari when I did the horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up section as well, but I did not use the 4-character set optimization trick. I just scrolled the multicolored character set data, so I had a smaller repeating pattern of multicolored characters. So I've got my infinite lives, large amount of lives, and I'm not really too worried about getting through this level, so let's skip ahead. Oh yeah, the thing to notice about this game as well is that these horizontal scrolling sections, and well actually they turn into multi-directional scrolling sections, these parts of the game have music background soundtracks as well, which is quite special, I think, right? So it's loaded a whole bunch of extra music data and it's playing that. So I'm guessing that the map scroll might be a little bit optimized for this, so music was able to be squeezed into this memory map. But yeah, it just adds a whole bunch of extra dimension and polish to this. Right. Again, very, very special. So this one is the first boss. It's like an eye which looks around. There aren't too many sprites. Actually, most of the sprites are used for the eyes that fly around and get thrown at you by the eye in the center. So I think this is like using the standard built-in multiplexor. I don't think it's using the sprite grid or the stack sprite rendering routine at all for this. So I think I've shot it enough time already now, and we should get an explosion any time now. There we go. Very simple explosion, actually. And then we have another lovely horizontally scrolling section. This one, if I remember rightly, the music kind of like hints that it's going to start speeding up at some particular point. So you can see here what I mean about the sprite updates being disconnected from the background scroll. those enemies that were meant to be attached, and this gun is meant to be attached to the background, but you can see it's updating in a weird way. And the gun emplacement there on these ones here, they judder around. And that's because the screen is meant to be trying to scroll quite slowly, but the sprites lack I think the horizontal resolution for being attached to the background. Maybe the multiplexor is just not synced properly with the screen scroll. Anyway, this is a forced scroll. The scroll is forced. In other words, it's on a predetermined path. And of course, we have this section of background characters which are being used for a parallax scroll effect. And I think there you can see that there's a bug in the actual scroll for the character set data. There's something weird is going on here. Just intrigued about the code which is running there in the sprite data, because we can see a whole bunch of non-sprite data in the sprite bank. And there we go. Let's have a look at the code that's running. Doesn't look like a music player routine, does it? Look, it looks like it's doing some kind of like animation routine or something like that. I think maybe the music data is somewhere else. So yeah, look at the memory map. You see the blue at the bottom of the memory map there indicates code execution. I guess that the game just needed to really fit all of this in memory somehow. So this part is where the game really gets quite busy in terms of its multiplexor going a bit crazy. And it has lots of enemies on the screen, lots of explosions. Lots of everything, really. Now these are large, expanded, stacked or grid arrangements of sprites flying around. And it kind of shows you what the enemy is going to look like. It then moves to this single background color, fast scroll, but with a large, again, a relatively large grid of sprites. And the enemy's weapons are sprites. And I think if you shoot it enough, then it basically detaches, I think, or something like that. Or another one comes along. But I think because the character screen is scrolling so quickly, I think the color screen is not updated at this point in time. So yeah, well, that looks like an expanded sprite, right? And we can see here, where is it in the sprite sheet? It's probably, where is it? It's probably, let's go, that makes it easier to see. It's that one there, yes. So it's a horizontally expanded sprite, almost certain. So when you pause the game, the music goes on in the background, which is kind of nice. And there we go, a nice regular sprite grid explosion effect, and then this smaller but gridded sprite, I think, sprite boss comes along and then just animates slightly differently, so it's like a second attack wave, if you like. Anyway, so once you destroy it, it just explodes. I'm just looking through how this scrolls, and you can see that the character screen scroll is actually really quite rapid. It's using both double button screens. But yeah, look, there's no updates to the colour ramp going on here. The only update to the colour ramp is the weapons fire from the player character. I wish I had the expanded laser weapon here, because it would be a lot easier to shoot this thing. Never mind. There we go. Boom. And then the level finishes. And the animated character for the parallax layer still animates in the background while it was fading out and the rest of the character screen wasn't scrolling. So I think we can see here that level 3 goes back to a single, well, it was using a single character set Anyway, we can see the Katakis, whatever it is, lives sprite message there. Now, this level is quite special. It's got a whole bunch of what looks like pre-computed sprite character animation frames for the background. So the background parallax layer is actually two sprites two characters updated in a masked grid arrangement. There's a real background brown static component, and then there is a half-speed more multicolor component which is brighter than just the brown background color. Bing bing bing, there we go, lots of extra lives, love that part of the level. And this scroll speeds up and slows down in this level quite a lot. And the honeycomb, the, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the hexagon shape scrolls at this speed here. Now I think at the moment it is synchronized, or it was synchronized with the foreground character scroll layer, but then when the foreground character scroll layer speeds up, you can see that the hexagonal shape scrolls at a different rate. So 3 layers of parallax, if you like. And this sparse character grid here that scrolls in multiple directions with this sprite grid boss only accentuates how crazy this multi 3-level parallax scrolling gets. Which, when I got this game originally, I was really very impressed with this effect. But generally speaking, it's just, you know, I think this is not updating the color RAM. Again, it's just updating the foreground character screen plus the background repeating character effect there, which it's just updating the character set data to affect that. But it's got that pre-calculated, pre-computed pattern there, I think, so that it's doing a lot of reads and writes. We can see there in the memory view it's doing an awful lot of probably very fast unrolled loop read and writes there to update the parallax effect. So we have what looks like the background characters at the bottom, and then the inverted ones is probably a mask for that, and then we have the data which is then logically ordered to the top, I expect. So it's using quite a lot of data for this, but you know, we saw something similar, I think, in Morpheus. So my previous video covered that as well, when Morpheus has that horizontally scrolling parallax grid effect when you launch or when you dock back or when you complete the level. It uses a very similar pre-computed array of characters, and I don't think it had masked data. I'd have to look back and check, but you know, including a pre-computed mask is kind of important here because it makes the update a lot simpler. I like the way that the direction of scroll for this level changes depending on how much of the boss that you've destroyed. I think that's quite a cool thing to do. Level 4 goes back to the tried and tested model of the multi-directional scrolling platform thing. I love this huge sprite being used for the the spaceship that you've just used coming back in again. The high resolution flame effect from those walker enemies. The walker is actually part of the character screen, but the high resolution flame effect is actually using sprites. Quite a lot of sprite frames, actually. Just need some extra lives. I used up quite a lot of lives during the scrolling routine. So let's skip ahead to the next boss. So as I destroy these kind of like parts of the level that you need to fall down through, watch the bottom 2 rows of the sprite data. They will get updated right now for the sprite grid. Again, using a lot of animation frames, we can see that its fiery breath weapon thing is updating the screen, the character set screen again. So a good mixture of sprites and characters. I just love the number of animation frames in this, and the how much memory was dedicated to these impressive bosses. What makes this game special is that even though it's dedicating quite a lot of memory for the boss graphics, the main part of the game level anyway has a lot of variation. And the game accomplishes that, of course, by updating the sprites dynamically as you progress through different parts of the level, especially when you want to get to where the bosses are. There we go, a lovely multiplexed sprite explosion effect. I think that's probably using the sprite multiplexor. So the previous levels didn't have the updating or animating cogwheels, but now this level has animating cogwheels and also the animating conveyor belts, which helps this level actually come alive even more, because we have the parallax scrolling effect plus the animating cogwheels. Just looks even more special. I love the mixture here as well of having the animating sprite cogwheels, which are enemies in their own right. Occasionally they will disconnect from the background and go bouncing around, and they're quite hard to kill. Actually, they do quite a lot of damage very quickly, but you can shoot them and destroy them, so that's an added advantage, right? So we've got these lovely repeating grid sprites, large walkers coming along, and I think they continuously walk towards the player. I think you just can't sit in one place. I think you have to advance the scroll for the screen, and then you have to escape the level. We now have level 5-1, and I think this is the last series of levels, if I remember correctly. And we have the multi-directional scrolling, but another lovely high-resolution parallax background layer. And this level, I remember, has tons of highly detailed sprite animation frames. So we've got these lovely squishy eyeball things, we've got the little grabby things. If you have a look in the sprite debug sprite data in the graphics map there, we've got what looks like, I don't know, they're animating rotating U shapes, which are high resolution bullets which get fired by certain enemies. We have all of these dropping down slime blobby things, or whatever they are, the green things. Look at those high resolution U things just rotating and flinging out. How many animation frames are you going to use for a bullet? It's crazy, right? And then we've of course got little face huggers, and we have opening eggs with obviously the face huggers bursting out of the eggs. All very kind of like reminiscent of a computer game I worked on, Alien Resurrection, many years ago. Then we've got these hand-based enemies with eyes, and they animate as well. And there's just tons of animation frames everywhere on this level. Absolutely bonkers crazy. And I think the reason why is because this level actually doesn't have, if I remember correctly, doesn't have a grid boss, a sprite grid, a boss sprite grid. So we can see that all of the animation frames can be used for a ton of variation in the enemies for this level. Oodles, actually. And this is actually a huge level as well, if I remember rightly. It takes me ages to run through this level because I can never remember the route through it. It's quite confusing. It's a good thing. It's a very large level. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. I'm just getting confused about where I should go. So after a very long time of running through this level, you eventually get to this larger alien head thing with more kind of like tentacles behind it. And I think this is near towards the exit for the level now. So let's keep on going. And then you get to this part and you go, well, what on earth? And then, aha, hidden block, jump up. Jump up. For whatever reason, jump up through to the end of the level. Okay. I'm just saving my progress now between each level and at each specific part of the level. So we can see that there's a ton of animation frames or graphics data being loaded for the boss. If I remember rightly, pay close attention again to the last couple of rows of sprite data in that graphics map, because I think once the level starts scrolling, I think it changes. So I have no idea what I'm meant to be doing at this particular point of the level. I think there might be a slight bug somewhere, because eventually you're meant to collect a jetpack which lets you float up through the level. So at the moment we have a whole bunch of kind of like little walker enemy sprites in the last two rows, plus some other animation frames. And just waiting patiently, I think, for the jetpack thing to come along. And there we go. On the right hand side there, bottom right hand corner, there is the jetpack. Right, okay. So the level has started moving up now, and we've got obviously another parallax scrolling effect. Vertical scrolling shoot 'em up section now, rather than horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up section. Forced scroll, obviously it's going through, it's just pre-arranged scrolling patterns with lots of enemies and power-ups. If you get caught underneath and get forced off the bottom of the screen, you die, and then you come back again. And then you can fly around through the background while you are invulnerable until a certain point when the invulnerability runs out. We can see that the parallax scrolling background part. Oh yeah, and when you use the energy bars, the scrolling pauses, of course. Like before, it's probably too time consuming to update the screen scroll while it's doing that. Fair enough, fair dues. Anyway, so let's go through this level, get towards the boss. Okay, so just after these disappear off the bottom, watch the sprite data. There we go. It updates the sprite animation frames. It copies them in over a period of several frames. Now this sprite grid is first appearing behind the parallax scrolling level. And then, here we go. We've got a sprite grid of this massive suited robot or whatever it is. Anyway, so it's got two frames plus the uppy downy arms thing, but basically it switches between left and right, and the animation frames, so that left and right hand view, were copied in just as the screen was scrolling up just prior to this. We can see that its main weapon, the big ball, which is kind of like the Turrican II's small ball weapon, is using characters, as you would kind of expect. We're using a single bank, screen bank here for the text screen behind, but yeah, a very impressive large sprite grid boss. Lots of animation frames. And and then when you shoot it enough, eventually it takes quite a large number of shots. And I don't see, there we go, whole bunch of, I don't know if that's multiplexed sprite explosions or if that's a grid of sprite explosions, but regardless, it's a nice explosion effect. And then we have this lovely end sequence. The end sequence loads some sprite animation frames, but we have mostly data being loaded, and that's because the ending screen doesn't use character set data, it's using bitmap. So first we get this lovely summary of all of your things that you've got in your game, so the number of lives and all of your bonus score accumulation and stuff going on here. Time left, the number of continues that you've got left, number of diamonds that you've collected, number of energy beam weapon things that you have left. And then we get this lovely fade in, which is using the screen blanking effect. We've got this player sprite flying out, and then we have all of these explosions. Now these sprite explosions, we get a big sprite explosion updating the sprite grid there, and then the sprites are basically cleared out, because then sprites are used for this scrolling message in front of the bitmap, and the bitmap data for the part of the bitmap screen that was destroyed basically flips over. So when that big explosion happens, the bitmap data was updated behind, and then the sprite big explosion disappears, and then you've got what's left here. And that's basically it. So we've got a lovely, again, what looks like a high resolution sprite grid using different colors, scrolling all of this text up. And you can see that the text updates sprite line by line, so the sprites are moving vertically, and then we've got our new rows of sprites being introduced at the bottom of the screen and just off screen in the border, and then it's being displayed and then moved up. And it's nice that the game has such a full and polished game ending sequence. I really appreciated this about the game. I think this is on the tape version as well, so it's good that it's on the disc version now, but also on the tape version. I was quite sad when I saw this, that Turrican II would be my last game on the Commodore 64, not my game. I'm reading what it says on the text, it's Manfred Trenz's last game. But of course, you know, Commodore 64 did not last forever. People need to go on to programming other computers where the money is. And I do enjoy the music on this. So I think we'll leave this video there. I think I wanted to go through the main large sprite bosses and some of the technical points about those and how the game did it, and the parallax scrolling and stuff like that. So thank you very much for watching these technical deep dive videos about retro Commodore 64 games. If you like this kind of stuff, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, have a great day, wherever you are.